Rosendahl. I live at 551 West Millwood Drive, Heber. And I've retired from the federal government after 33 years. Most of it was handling contracts with other countries, between the United States and those countries. And then I worked 17 years in contracts in facilities and building new buildings, repair and alterations in 6 states. And I recently, or today, saw some information about the building, the high school that's down here a little ways. It was built just in 2010, and the procedures, you know, with the federal government, we don't have an agency chief handle the contract. Somebody who knows about contracting and knows about architects and engineering does that work. It's not the people who head up the different agencies. And when that school was built, 5 teachers that had no experience in architecture or engineering were responsible for, and it was totally mishandled. When I read this report, I am shaking. I am so upset that they wasted our money and they built a building that is not able to handle the school kids in just since 2010. The Park City High School was built in 1981, and it's still a great high school, and it's handling all of the kids. And it just makes you wonder, with the cost overloads of more than $20 million because of people who are inexperienced, I don't think we can afford to have our tax money pay for another group of people who don't know what they're doing. Because also, that chart over there that shows what the increase will be, last year, I paid, if I could finish this, $4.21 for my taxes. This year, it's almost $1,000. Wow. And so the cost overloads on $150 million, I can't afford. I'm retired. You need to get somebody else. You need to build on to the high school that you have here. And the expansion is going all on the northeast.
Hi, I'm Cindy Edwards, 520 Dutch Summit Court in Midway. I think we could solve our problems if we made this valley a less desirable place to live, but unfortunately it's gorgeous here. People love it. The school district is amazing. So I am part of just a group me thread of bonds and midways, and I am pro bond. I walk into Midway Elementary. Brian Thorne has to have the smell of a toilet every day that he goes to work because there are lots of pee-pee and poo-poo with way too many kids in that school, and so it smells like a toilet. So, but the questions, I try to hear both sides from the women's in my community and the men when they pipe in too, but the thread is called Midway Mamas, so it's mamas. So the questions that they have that I would like to ask you, so that instead of directing them to the website, I can give a quick synopsis on that thread to hopefully give them more information so that they can vote pro as well. The questions are, why are we not adding on to Midway Elementary? I don't know if it's just the swath of the land that lessens the cost of building a new school, so that's one question, is why can't we just build on? Another question is, why can't we keep Midway Elementary and build another school and have 2 schools with a smaller number? And then the third question was, they bring up the price for the new school, and some of them ask, because they hear that the cost of the new school is so high, why did it have to be so high? We could build multiple schools for the price of this new elementary school. So those are the 3 questions. If you could give like a synopsis, and then I can answer those quickly, or if you think it's better to just direct them to the website.
Dave McNaughton, 2785 South, 1040 East. I wasn't going to get up. I think you've heard a lot of great positive things. But I was at Park City. They just totally rebuilt that building in 2006. And they did it because it was a mess and they needed to fix it. So to suggest that it was a great building and it doesn't get half the growth that we've had. So I kind of had to jump in. I spent 9 years as an administrator there, and their growth is nothing like what we experience. And then since I'm up here, I just got to say, wax nostalgic. Years ago, as a kid, I can remember driving with my dad, going somewhere, and for some reason we had his high school yearbook. He graduated here, I did not. And we could look at every picture, and he could tell me who that person was. And it just blew my mind. I then graduated from Clearfield High School, and I couldn't tell you one kid that was sitting next to me in graduation. My graduating class was almost 600. I want my kids, and I've only got one left, and who knows if we're going to get this built before she gets to the high school, but I want my kids to be able to look and say, I know those kids, because that also keeps kids safe when they can build relationships with everybody and they know who's in their school. I'm in a great building. I got lucky. Timpanogos Middle School is a great building. When I think about what TIS was like in the last year, it was brutal. In fact, I remember Brooke Hatch Mayor getting up and saying, we can't fit. We're waiting in line to the bathroom. We're doing all. What's it going to look like in 6 years at Wasatch High School if we can't get this done? We're going to be in the same boat where we're losing class time because we have to increase passing time in classes. We've got to get it done. And I just think my building's a great model. We've got over almost 1,000 kids, and yet we don't feel packed. When this building is together and we've got 1,500 kids, we're not going to feel packed. And that's what lets us get to know who these kids are. And I just applaud you for doing it. I, too, voted for you guys, or at least one of you. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Any comments or response to questions?
Yeah, let's get after the Midway question. So the reason why we're not adding on to Midway, although Cindy's still here, yeah, there you go, is first of all, it's an old building, and from our experience, to continue to add on to an old building that has an infrastructure that is to the point of no return doesn't give us confidence that we can prepare for the future. And to continue to add wings and cafeterias and classrooms, as a board, we collectively feel that it's best to build a new building that can hold the community of Midway. That school was built 30 years ago, 300 kids. Now there's almost 700 kids in there, and the infrastructure has been added on multiple times, and another addition is not what we think is the best for the future. Please, yeah, help me out.
The size of the Midway School lot, if we were to add on and make the school bigger, we can't expand the lot. It already is, I believe it's just over 8 acres. And so if we continue to make that school bigger, like our numbers show back there, it would be 850. Interestingly, when Mr. Thorne did $399 for the school evaluations, Charleston and Walsburg attended Midway School. Charleston and Walsburg were taken out of Midway School a couple of years ago. So there was a drastic reduction to allow the growth to come in, which it has come in. So a couple other reasons why.
So the second one is, why can't we keep Midway Elementary School and have 2 schools in the community? So to find pieces of property in Midway that are 13 plus acres to build a new elementary school that's going to hold the community are really, really hard to find. I was just made aware of a real estate deal that closed yesterday in Midway for for 1 acre, $700,000. And so we're dealing with that right now. And we're working towards finding 14 acres that developers are trying to find at the same time. And we found a seller that was willing to swap land. And so when you talk about financially responsible, we like that because it helps us reduce the cost of the new piece of property because we're in a land swap. Is that fair? Anything else to add to that?
With the land swap, I'm sorry.
No, help.
With the land swap, when we build the Midway Elementary School, we will rent our school for $1 a year to be able to remain there and build on the other site. And so it's very beneficial for us to be in the situation that we're in.
And that site is 12, I think you mentioned, but it's 12 acres. So to be able to build a school and have area for students to be able to go out and play, and also benefit the community, more fields for, teams or whatever, it's beneficial.
And in the same area where the impact of it will be less as far as building roads or whatever, get to the school, right in the same corridor where schools.
And I think the last, we actually don't need 2 smaller schools. We need to take 700 kids and to build a brand new elementary school. Public education is reactionary. It's really hard to be proactive. I think this board is as proactive as we can by purchasing property and planning for the future. But to build an empty school that only has a couple hundred kids in it, that we're hoping to fill up in the next 10 years is something that we don't feel like it's responsible to do. When we need 2 full elementary schools that hold 1,500 students in the elementary age kids in Midway, then we'll build a second school. And then the price of the school, I'll refer to the superintendent when it comes to why we're building schools that are overpriced and how that's not true. The construction costs are what they are, and I feel we're building schools that are at par of what other communities are building their schools for right now.
Absolutely. Our schools come in price per square foot the same as any other schools around the state. Schools are being built differently today than they were when some of our aging schools were lasting for 40 or 50 years. I will tell you the schools that are being built today, not only in Wasatch, but anywhere in the state of Utah, in around the country, they'll last well over 100 years. We're not using anything fancy in them. We're using components that will last for those 100 years. The current high school was finished in '09, so we've had 10 years. We hoped to get 10 years. If the bond passes today, will be another 3 to 4 years opening the new school. That means that we're going to somehow squeeze 14 years out of that school. That was more than we ever hoped for with the pace of growth that we experience in our county. So if you walk into that high school, even though it's been open 10 years and it's got 2,300 and something students over there right now, walk in there on an early morning before it's full of students and walk down the hall, it looks brand new. The components that it's built out of, the split-faced block down the halls, the tile, floors, the things that go into a school nowadays are not fancy. They're of commercial grade and they stand up for a long, long time. The carpet wears for a good 10 years plus, with hundreds and thousands of kids walking on it. So the idea that we're building schools that are any more expensive or fancy than anyone else is simply not true. And I'd love to meet with anybody that would like to meet with me and go over that in detail. We do have the technology nowadays to build them to last over 100 years, and that's what we intend to do. Midway is one of the last schools left in our district that's not built to that standard. The rest of them pretty well are at this point. So we're making progress in that area.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for the Midway Group in Dutchfield. A couple of years ago, there was a proposal to have that part of the community go to Heber Valley, and be bused to Heber Valley. And we met with them, and we talked about solutions, time and time again. And there really wasn't one. And so as a board member, I didn't like the way that it felt that I represented a community where there wasn't a long-term solution for the elementary schools, for the elementary school kids. And so over the course of a couple of years, we've figured out what the best long-term solution is, and it's to build a new school in a very similar location across the Beachy Lane. So I'm excited that we have a solution for Midway to stay as a community and not have buses taking them to Heber schools, which I'm a Pathfinder. I graduated from J.R. Smith, 5th grade, K-5, and so I feel like my education in Heber has helped me a ton. Not that it's any different in Midway. A couple other things that I think is important to address about the smaller town. Smaller town, smaller schools, and the board feels strongly about that, and maybe we have different philosophy from other individuals, but I mean, I talk to people that moved in from California all the time, and the larger school districts in other locations are not an option. And so what they do is they put their children in private schools. And the individuals that are in Utah that come from other states say that our public schools are just as good or better than some of the private schools. And it costs $40,000 per child to put them in a private school per year. And so I just think that that's important to mention as we discuss people moving into the smaller town. The town is continuing to grow, but we as a school board feel very strongly to keep it rural and keep it small because we believe that that's what's best for students.
As far as this this notion that we continue to stack bonds and tax increases, you know, the tax code in Utah is written in favor of the taxpayer as it should be, and they normalize down on their own as part of the code. They're spread out as new people move in. So somebody was talking, I forget who, about paying all up front. It's not paid all up front. This bond will be a 20-year bond, and each year as new people move into the county, they will help pay for that school. And it will be spread out among all of the new homes that come, all the assessed valuation. And so this is not something that is just stuck on the current population. The new people moving in will pay their share. The high school, the current high school that we're in has 8 years left on the bond. When we floated that bond, we advertised that correctly at $78 per 100,000. Today, that's in the low 50s. So it's come down that far in the past years because there are a lot more people helping pay it off than there was then. Our current bond the most recent bond that were the 2 schools and the pool, it started out in the 60s. Interest rates have gone up some since the 09 bond, and started out in the 60s. Well, with some good work from Keith and the people that he works with, our financial advisors that help us with our bonds. We refinanced those bonds when interest rates came back down, and that price per 100,000 has gone from 60 into the 40s. So we are working for our taxpayers. We're doing the best we can. We're doing what we can to help you from the school district standpoint. But there's only so many things that we're in control of. As mentioned, the Old Mill Elementary bond was retired last year. So that bond for most of its life was probably in the $20, $25 per 100,000 range. Towards the end, it ended up lower that, more like $15, but it was retired last year. It went away. So just so that we understand, these things naturally are spread out as growth comes into the community, and they do dial down. We won't get into the tax rate stuff. It's getting late, but it does work in your favor to move these things in the right direction for the taxpayer.
I do think that there's a misnomer about the design of the school. We hear a lot that it's for the design or the architects no longer around. This school has been built multiple times across the state. We've recently been in other school districts that have modeled their design after our school, and we want to see their improvements and how we can continue to design this school to best fit the needs of our students and our teachers. I think we're at four times it's been rebuilt. Ours is the fifth.
4 or 5 times by Alpine. Canyons. Other districts have used this plan because it is such a well-designed, efficient plan, as you heard the principal talk about.
Okay, we'll open it back up for
Suzanne Prince, 260 South 80 East of Midway. Full disclosure, I'm an educator in the Wasatch County School District, which I'm grateful for. I've taught in Jordan District, Park City District before I transferred back to this district, and I was pleased and overjoyed to be able to get brought back onto this district. It is where my heart is and my love is. I do have a concern when we talk about adding on to the current high school. That's a concern for me. I was one of the first classes, I wasn't the first class, Sean may have been, that went through Midway Elementary.
I was a second grader.
Second grader. So I was one of the first classes. I think there was one class before me, and my mom was my kindergarten teacher. My mom was the principal of that school when they added on, and her concern at that time was they can add on to the building, but they can't add on to the cafeteria or the plumbing, and that it was a problem she foresaw at that time, which has become a huge problem now. And I see that with the high school. We've already added on to the cafeteria. We can add classrooms onto that building, but we can't add opportunities for the kids, and we can't fix the cafeteria and the plumbing. It's going to become a problem. So that is my concern. And I know that the building was built so that we could add on to it, but it's already huge. I've had 3 kids graduate in the last 4 years from Wasatch High. They all had a fabulous experience. all 3 of them participated in varsity sports and were successful. And my youngest just graduated last year. She got a scholarship to 3 of the 4 schools she applied to and was accepted into BYU. And she wasn't a 4.0 student, but she took advantage of every opportunity that the high school had to offer. She took her AP classes, she passed every one she took. The teachers are fabulous. If the kids take those opportunities and they put their hearts in it, they can pass, they can get the education they want. But the school is so big that as an educator personally, I have a fabulous administrator. He supports me in every way. But as an educator, when my classes have 37 in them, it's hard to love every child, every period, and let them know that they're important. And that's our goal as educators, is to let those students know that we're there. We're raising the future generation. That's what we're doing. They're getting an education along the way, but we're raising our community. And who's going to lead that community? And we need to give them the skills that they need. And as an educator, I need smaller classrooms to be able to do that at the greater end. Thank you for listening.
My name is Eric Campbell. I live at 1110 East, 850 South. I do work for the school district, but I would really remiss if I did not tell you how much I appreciate all that you've done with this bond and everything else. That it's always been student-centered and focused. And even though I'm a school district employee, I want to talk about my experience as a father and experiencing what it's like to have 2 split schools. I have a special needs son that attends the middle school. And I can't tell you how comforting it is for me, for him to know students, and students to know him by name. We can walk down the hall, and they know his name. Teachers that are his and not his know his name, and they watch out for him. I've worked in large schools and other school districts, like Clark County School District. That is not a possibility in those larger schools. For students to be known personally and to be taken care of personally. There is the academic benefits of a small school that has been talked about, and I know not some have talked about they haven't felt that in a small school. But I don't think anyone can talk about there not being a benefit to the social and emotional needs of students with the size of schools that you guys are focused on creating for our district. I love the fact, and I appreciate the fact that they are also, those schools are being placed in the communities and not far away. That's a huge benefit, I think, for our students to be able to walk or be able to travel short distances and feel like that school is a part of their community. There's a safety that comes with that I think we can't put a price tag on. And I appreciate everything that you've done, all the entities you've worked with, all the maps and charts and growth that you've looked at to make the best decisions that we can with the information that we have. Thank you.
Randy Larson, 4050 Greener Hills Drive, Heber, Utah. I'm in a unique position. I'm also bond counsel to the school district. I represent multiple school districts across the state. In fact, I was originally scheduled to be at Ogden School District tonight and made a trade to come to my home school district for this hearing. And with that perspective, I would like to thank the school board and the staff for the efforts that are given. I joke a lot of times with my clients to say, you need to write into your next employment contract hazard pay for the next election. I know that's not true. I mean, you do this without compensation in most circumstances, and the standards of the information that you give are higher than oftentimes what is required of those who come against. But that is kind of the American way, to have debate and to have arguments. I hope that what isn't lost on the public is the information that has been presented. Sitting here and being intimately involved with many school districts, I'm not sure that there's been an assertion or a question asked that isn't, at least in part, already answered by the information that's available to the public. And that's a tribute to your ability to try and be responsive to the questions that come. Let me get a little clinical with a bond issuance. The school board cannot impose the bonds upon the public. It's an election. Everyone will have a chance to vote. And in that election, you decide, you vote as to how you feel you want your school district to be run, similar to how you've elected the board officials that are in there. The tax impact that you'll be voting for is right in the ballot. It's listed at average property tax value and also per 100,000. You'll be able to say whether that's acceptable to you or not. You also should note that in my over 20 years of bond counsel experience, I've never had a tax impact actually be set or be met by the actual bond. It's because that tax impact by statute is required to be a snapshot of today. There's no growth accounted for it. There's no increase of the property tax, payers, or valuation. And so it is intentionally conservative. Construction costs are running at 6 to 10%. 10% more recently. You have a chance right now to borrow, given the credibility of the school district, at 3% or less for 20 years. If you think of borrowing at 3% and construction costs going at 6 to 10%, you'll never dig out of the hole. Doesn't mean you have to build the schools. That's a legitimate question. But the facilities that will ultimately need to be built are just escalating, and they're escalating at a rate higher than what you can finance at. Lastly, the growth for this county is greater than anyone else in the country. It is atypical to build a new high school before